Mr. President, as I've said before, Republicans had two goals when it came to tax reform. First, we wanted to put more money in the pockets of hardworking Americans right away. And second, we wanted to create the kind of economy that would give Americans access to economic security for the long term. To achieve the first goal, we cut tax rates across the board, nearly doubled the standard deduction, and doubled the child tax credit. And Americans are already seeing this relief in their paychecks. To achieve the second goal, we reformed our tax code to make it easier for businesses to create jobs, increase wages, and expand opportunities for workers. And I'm proud to report that less than 5 months since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was signed into law, we're already seeing an improved playing field for American workers. Mr. President, there are a lot of things that go into giving a worker a secure economic future. A good job, good wages, opportunities to grow, good retirement benefits, and opportunities to achieve the education necessary for that good job or that wage hike. Sometimes a degree or certification can make all the difference between an okay job and the kind of job that brings financial security for the long term. But getting that degree or certification isn't always easy. Sometimes it can be cost prohibitive. Sometimes it can be difficult to fit the degree requirements around an existing job. Mr. President, as I said before, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is already improving the playing field for workers and creating the kind of economic environment that will give more Americans access to economic security for the long term. Businesses are creating new and better paying jobs. They are increasing and raising wages, and they're expanding opportunities, all essential elements of giving workers access to the careers that will give them access to long-term financial security. But that's not all. Businesses are also increasing benefits, including, in several cases, education benefits. Grocery store chain Kroger recently announced its Feed Your Future program, which will provide employees with up to $3,500 a year to put toward their education, whether the employee is working toward a GED or an advanced degree. Both full and part-time employees will be eligible for the program, which will provide employees with up to $21,000 for their education. The company is even introducing an educational leave of absence, which will allow employees to take time off for approved studies without losing their place at the company. And Mr. President, it's not just Kroger. McDonald's is accelerating increased investment in its Archways to Opportunity Education program thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The program will now offer workers $2,500 a year toward their education costs, up from $700 a year previously. And there is no lifetime cap on the amount an employee can receive for his or her education. Plus, employees can now work as few as 15 hours a week and still be eligible for the program, which will make it easier for employees to combine a job and an education. And then there's Boeing, which is investing $100 million in training and education for its employees, and Express Scripts, which is investing in its workers of the future by creating an education fund for employees' children, and Disney, which is investing $50 million in a new education program for employees, and more. Mr. President, it's another way that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is giving American workers access to the resources that they need for a secure and prosperous future. Mr. President, I would like to switch gears for just a moment and turn to another important topic that addressed just moments ago by the Democratic leader, and that's net neutrality. There is widespread agreement among senators of both parties that we need to maintain a free and open Internet. And there's widespread agreement among both parties that we need net neutrality legislation. But as with other issues that should be, and technically are, non-controversial, Democrats have decided to take the issue of net neutrality and make it partisan. Instead of working with Republicans to develop permanent net neutrality legislation, they've decided to try to score political points with a partisan resolution that would do nothing to permanently secure net neutrality. Mr. President, for years, the commercial Internet flourished under a light-touch regulatory regime. Free of onerous, heavy-handed regulations, the Internet grew and thrived, offering Americans a steadily increasing array of benefits from online education to online shopping. But during the Obama administration, the Federal Communications Commission, on a party-line vote, decided to change the way in which the Internet was regulated. Instead of the regulatory approach that had worked for years, the Obama FCC decided that the Internet should be regulated under a set of regulations that were developed over 80 years ago to manage monopoly telephone services. Think of that, Mr. President. The 1934 Communications Act, designed to govern and regulate Ma Bell, being used to regulate the Internet. Well, that decision posed a number of problems for the future of the Internet. For starters, heavy-handed government regulations tend to stifle the kind of growth and innovation that have always flourished around the Internet. There was also serious reason to be concerned that this new regulatory regime would discourage companies from expanding access to broadband. That's a big concern for my state, where too many individuals still lack reliable Internet service. And in fact, the FCC found that the decision to regulate the Internet under the 1934 telephone regulatory regime has in fact slowed investment, which has restricted the improvement of Internet services for rural Americans, like many that I represent in South Dakota. In response to these problems, the FCC recently decided to restore the light-touch regulatory regime that the Internet had thrived under. Up until 2015, for 2 decades, the Internet was regulated under the light touch. Everybody agreed that was the best approach. Let the Internet grow and flourish and innovate and expand and give more people access to high-speed Internet services. Well, when the FCC decided to change that, it created the opportunity for us to adopt net neutrality legislation to permanently address concerns about blocking, throttling, paid prioritization, and to deal with these concerns under a regulatory regime that's suitable for the 21st century Internet. That's what the FCC did when they went back to what we had for 2 decades prior to 2015. They opened the door to address this in the way in which we should address this. The people's representatives here in Congress, the people are concerned about the blocking of unlawful content on the Internet, about the throttling of Internet speeds. Well, let's lock it into law. Let's put rules for the open Internet into law so that we fully understand and can move forward in a way that doesn't have this constant ambiguity and back and forth from one FCC to the next, or worse yet, spending it in litigation in courtrooms. But instead of moving forward with that approach with Republicans to draft such legislation, the Democrat leadership has decided to try and score political points by pushing a resolution to undo the FCC's decision, even though, Mr. President, undoing this decision will do nothing to provide a permanent solution on net neutrality. And Democrat leaders' decision to pursue this partisan course has stalled conversations that were occurring on a bipartisan basis between members, both sides of the aisle, who have wanted to come together to deal with this issue. I've been engaged in those conversations now for the last 3 years. We were making progress, coming together around a legislative solution that would get rid of all this uncertainty and unpredictability and ambiguity and the clouds that hang over this issue, and allow open Internet rules to be put into place and allow the Internet to continue to thrive and grow and innovate. Mr. President, for decades, the commercial Internet has been a source of innovation, economic growth, and opportunity. But that growth and opportunity will be stalled and stifled if we keep going the way that we're going. We can't have Internet regulations ping-ponging back and forth from administration to administration, or from year to year, for that matter. That will bring innovation and investment to a standstill, and that is the worst possible thing that you can do for those people across this country, many of whom I represent in South Dakota, who still don't have access to high-speed internet services. Nobody's going to be interested in taking risks or investing in innovation if they can't predict what the rules will look like a year down the road. The only way to preserve the dynamism of the internet while also protecting consumers is for Democrats and Republicans to come together on legislation to provide long-term certainty. But for that to happen, Democrats are going to have to rise to the occasion, and they're going to have to stop playing political games to score political points and start focusing on actually legislating. Because you see, this CRA, this Congressional Review Act resolution, is going nowhere. Yeah, they might narrowly get a vote out of the Senate because we have a senator missing here, but it's not going anywhere in the House. It's not going to be signed into law by the President. All it does is prolong this debate that we have, and we could settle that debate once and for all if we're willing to sit down and actually work on a legislative solution. So I hope that once the Democrats have gotten this latest political stunt out of their system, that they'll be willing to come to the table and develop a real solution that will allow the internet to flourish for generations to come. Mr. President, the Democratic leader who was just down here said the question here is, whose side are you on? Well, I think that's a good question to ask. Because if the question is, whose side are you on, I think the choices are you on the side of big government and heavy-handed regulation that stifles investment in the internet, stifles innovation, or are you truly for a free and open internet, a free market, where the internet continues to thrive and to grow and to provide so many opportunities for people around this country? He said passing the CRA makes economic sense. Well, not if you want to get 5G, not if you want to provide high-speed internet services, and not if you want to deploy broadband to rural areas of this country, because that takes investment. And investment follows certainty. They want to know what the rules are. They want the rules to be clear and unambiguous so that this can move forward, they can move forward and continue to see this economic miracle of the internet advance and continue to be taken advantage of and benefited by so many Americans. Mr. President, we have a chance to do that. We really do. But we can't do it when we sit around and mess around with political theater and political stunts, which is precisely what this is, and everybody knows it. Our colleagues on the other side know it. I've talked to lots of them who come up to me and say, we want to work with you on legislation, but you know, right now, we've got this CRA we're going to vote on, which is a shiny object, and everybody gets to shoot at it, and people can go out and raise money, and they can get people all fired up at the grassroots that this is somehow going to be some magic solution, but it is not. It doesn't do anything. Even if it succeeded, I mean, what are you doing? You're just creating more back and forth from one FCC to the next. You're just requiring more money to be spent in courtrooms on litigation and lawsuits rather than being invested in the types of technologies that will bring that high-speed access to more people in this country, that will get us to the 5th generation of technology, which is where everybody wants to go. Why don't we just sit down and do that? Why is this so hard? Well, it's because people think that there are partisan political points that can be scored by doing this. But remember one thing, too. The Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval was created by Congress to unwind or prevent harmful regulations from going into effect that administration might be putting into effect. It's a way for Congress to be heard from if, in fact, the Congress, the people's representatives, believe the administration is heading in the wrong direction when it comes to some regulation. It has never been used. The CRA has never been used to re-regulate. That's what this is doing. The FCC is unwinding a heavy-handed regulation that went into effect in 2015, and this is going to attempt now to re-regulate, not to deregulate or to prevent regulations from going into effect. That's never happened before. And do my colleagues on the other side honestly think that Republicans in the House of Representatives are going to vote for that? Or that President Trump would sign it into law? No. Everybody knows better than that. So what are we doing? We're playing a silly game here at the expense of a real solution, a solution that is out there waiting for us if we will simply sit down, as we should, as elected representatives, as United States Senators on both sides of the aisle, to address an issue that's very important to our economy and very important to a lot of Americans. And so I hope we can do that. But we're not going to get there as long as we continue with this charade that we're taking on here today and in the weeks ahead. Mr. President, it's time for clear rules. We want an open and free Internet that people, investors can invest in, that people can benefit from that investment, and that provides the types of opportunities and gains in productivity and continues the economic miracle that the Internet has been for this country. That's what this debate is about. Pure and simple. It's nothing else. We have a chance to do that, but we can't do it if we continue to play this sort of a game. So I hope that my colleagues who will, at some point, and maybe we'll go through this, maybe we'll have this vote. If we do, maybe they'll win. They might win by a 1-vote margin. It's not going anywhere. We all know that. Let's get serious. Let's get serious on behalf of the American people. If there are legitimate, serious concerns about potential abuses by Internet service providers when it comes to throttling speeds or blocking lawful content or any of that sort of thing, paid prioritization, let's address that in law. Let's quit messing around. Let's get to work. Mr. President, I yield the floor.